The majority of our life is lived in liminal space.
And there's this in-between space, this liminal space.
This liminality that reveals possibility.
I think we're in a liminal moment, but also in a place of transformation.
I have great affection for the church and a troubled relationship with it.
Just to be alive in time means that we're on the threshold of the future.
That can't be the gospel, because God said to love our neighbors.
We don't know what the future looks like. We have to work it out together.
All right, welcome to the Liminal Living Podcast. This is Tom Rundel coming at you with a solo episode. And I'll be a little honest, I'm a little bit intimidated about doing a solo episode because I've been doing so many interviews. And part of me is like, I just want to talk to people about stuff. But I know a lot of you are asking me about, well, what's your thoughts on this and that? And so I thought, all right, I'll do another solo episode. I'll throw this one out there. Last week I threw a message out there from my church that I'm a pastor at. And so this one, I'm just going to talk to you. And so I thought we're in the middle of Advent season. Well, kind of on the beginning end of the Advent season. It just started Sunday. And I thought we could talk a little bit about Advent and what it means. Because we're in the midst of that Christmas season. It starts kind of probably in our culture, November or November 1st, or right after Halloween's done. People are like switching gears and listening to Christmas music. But the Christmas season, I think we like it as a culture because it has themes in it that are kind of those universal themes that we like. There's hope, there's joy, there's peace, there's love. And those four things that are, really rooted in the Christmas season are actually rooted in the liturgical season called Advent. Now, I didn't grow up observing Advent. That was something the Catholics did, and if the Catholics were doing it, they were probably wrong because I was charismatic fundamentalist, and that was my mindset. So by the time I took on the pastor role that I'm in now, 7 years ago, I was really open to learning about the liturgical calendar, but I'd never been in a church that practiced it. We would maybe nod at it here and there, but in this church, we actually follow the liturgical calendar. So I've now observed about 7 liturgical Advent cycles, and I've really learned a lot. One of the things I like about the liturgical calendar is that I don't get to just hammer people over the head with whatever I'm passionately angry about or excited about. I'm given like a calendar and there's readings and you go through the readings. And so I submit myself to the calendar and I learn a whole lot of things during that. And I have done now 7 Advent cycles and yeah, I've learned a lot. Now there's 4 Sundays in Advent. And then there's one that is like Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, traditionally. And a lot of churches have like an Advent wreath and there's 5 candles. And every Sunday they light another candle. It's a progressive candle lighting. And then on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, they light the 5th candle. And traditionally, each candle represents one of those themes. And it starts with hope, and then goes to joy, and then peace, and then love, and then salvation, or the Christ candle. But I like to call it the redemption candle, because salvation has a whole bunch of connotations to it. But hope, joy, peace, love, and redemption are kind of those themes of Advent. And we just did the first Sunday of Advent this past Sunday, and hope is what we talked about. And I don't really know if we understand hope very well as a culture. Like hope is what we cling to after we've pleaded with the invisible CEO running the universe, right? Like how much of your prayer life is just spent pleading and then going into bargaining and then into crap that didn't work and then into, well, let me retell the narrative in a way that upholds my theology. And then silent resentment sneaks in towards this unfeeling, unmoving God. That tends to be a cycle that people get caught into. And we think that hope is what we're clinging to in the midst of that, and then it didn't work, and then what's the use of hope? And I think that's the wrong understanding of hope. It's probably the wrong understanding of prayer, too, pleading with the invisible CEO of the universe. Like, oh, please, please, please let them get better. Please, please, please help me out of this financial mess. Please, please, please give me this opportunity, right? A lot of our prayers are just pleadings with the universe that things will go better and go right. And if we're really honest, most of the time it didn't work. And so instead of reworking the theology, which is a big task, we then go into retelling the story of what God must have been doing in order to make sense of how God didn't do something for us. So, the classic one is, please heal my loved one, please heal my loved one. They pass away. It's like, well, they've experienced ultimate healing. That might be a true statement. I mean, they're with God and they're better. I don't want to take away from that, but it's kind of like well, God didn't do it, so God must have had a different plan in mind, kind of a thing. The grand CEO of the universe had some other plan in mind, and so here I am. The pleading didn't work, so now I got to retell the story in a way that matches my theology, upholds it up. But what happens if you do that cycle? You slowly start to build resentment as this unfeeling God, unresponsive God, keeps not answering the prayers that we pray, the pleadings that we have. And then one day you just kind of be like, what is even real anymore? Now, most of us, it takes a while for us to do those cycles until we get to the place of open cynicism. But those who have gone through a great tragedy or a great upending, you kind of get there faster. So we're all kind of in that zone, but we kind of cling to hope on the front end, then become disillusioned on the back end. And we hold off the disillusionment for as long as we can. We didn't get that outcome in the interview, or we got sick, or we lost that loved one, or we received that diagnosis, right? And I started to really think about it. Bad theology is insulation from reality. Bad theology is insulation from reality. And our understanding of hope is the buttress that keeps that fragile framework aloft. I came to that understanding a little while ago, I think. Bad theology is insulation from reality. And our understanding of hope is the buttress that keeps the fragile worldview aloft. Here's what I mean. Like, God is good all the time. Even after cancer? Well, let me retell that story to show you that God is still good, that I'm clinging to that thing, right? Or God's got this. I just need to let go and let God. Even after your whole world falls apart, kind of a thing, like you lost a job and you just got to let go and let God, and then you're just waiting for God to come in and rescue, and then nothing happens, and you're like, what's happening? Where's God, right? Or God won't ever give me more than I can handle. It's like, really? Even after the trauma stacks up and your body breaks down, like still you're going to say the things. Now, there might be some truth in those statements. I believe that God is good. I believe that God eventually has got this. I do believe that uh, I don't believe that God will give us more than we can handle, but I don't believe that God's giving us the stuff that we can't handle. So there's that part of the theology there. But what these are, they're not theologies. They're cliches that we grasp for when life doesn't make sense. And when the faith in our mind doesn't match our lived experience of it, we need something. And so we grab for the cliche to kind of hold things together. And then we misunderstand that as being hope or being faith or being theology. And one of the things I think we confuse is toxic positivity. We confuse that for the theology of hope. And I don't think that that is correct. That clinging to the cliches might get you through the day. And sometimes you're going to need that to get through the day, but it's not going to take you the whole journey. So if you've ever used those phrases, I'm not really like dogging on them. I'm just saying they're not going to get you all the way there. So they're a partial truth that is insulating us from the harshness of life, the harshness of reality. But you got to get out of that cynicism spiral by recognizing the bad theologies that are in place that are trying to insulate you from the harshness of reality. So toxic positivity. I've noticed this a lot. Like it's just permeates Western Christian culture. You just got to be happy all the time, and everything's got to be okay all the time, and everything's got to be resolved all the time, like life's a sitcom or something. And like, we're just not okay with tension. We're not okay with tragedy. We're not okay with the unresolved and all that kind of stuff. It's like we need the positive resolution that upholds the theology that says everything is great, everything is good, and God's in full control of everything, and it'll be all right. And I think we need to know that everything's going to be all right. Like, we need comfort, and because the world can be a scary place, but it's not hope. Toxic positivity, like, it might get you through the day, but it's not going to take you out the rest of the journey. So what I think it is it's a replacement of reality with narratives that keep us comfortable in our current theological framework. That's what I think toxic positivity is. A replacement of reality with narratives that keep us comfortable in our current theological framework. And you might need that comfort for the day when the big tragedy hits. You're going to need the comfort things, the things that can get you through the day. So I'm not like dogging on positivity and positive thinking and all that kind of stuff. We need that stuff, but it can become toxic when it replaces reality with stories that aren't true. And they're just trying to keep us comfortable in a current theological framework that's too small to hold the world we now inhabit. And so I think it comes from years of training and indoctrination that says that positivity is hope, and clinging to it despite everything else is going to be faith. So your world's totally falling apart, and so you got to say the cliches over and over and over again because that's faith. And I don't think it is. I think that is, again, it might get us through the day, not going to take us on the journey. So I think at the end of the day, what it is mental gymnastics that are contorting reality to fit inside the theological box that's really too small to contain the world we're living in, is what those things are. So this mental framework can help for a little while until it doesn't anymore. And there is, when the system of, organized church is built upon this understanding that positivity is hope and clinging to it is faith, then there's a lot of collateral damage. And the collateral damage is always people. People are collateral damage of systems, bad systems. And every system that humans are going to build is going to be bad. But what we need is awareness of how they work so that we're not just sucked into them and then think, well, what's wrong with me? Well, maybe there's some things that you need to fix, but you're probably inhabiting a system that is oppressive. And church can be one of those systems: government, economy, even like your job system, like how your job is organized. Anytime humans organize ourselves, there becomes a system, and then the system becomes oppressive at some point. And when a church system is built around toxic positivity as hope and clinging to it as faith, the collateral damage is always people. So let's think about who is collateral damage. Now, this is not an exhaustive list. This is just people I've thought of this morning when I was having coffee and playing a little bit of Minecraft on my phone, and I'm thinking. And so here's collateral damage number one that I thought of. Folks who are neurodivergent are collateral damage for toxic positivity being mistaken as hope. Because these people, that's a big spectrum. I'm talking about people that I know who are neurodivergent. They have a hard time just agreeing with something that they experience as false. They can't inhabit, like, neurodivergent people have a broader radar, and they see more things and they feel more things and they experience more things than typical neurobrains. They are very empathic. They're very, and they're tired a lot because they experience so much of the world. Like 80% of our energy is spent on our brain, and neurodivergent people use their brain way more than other people because they're constantly throwing the radar out and feeling all the feelings and connecting to all the peoples. They're very empathic that way. And again, this isn't all neurodivergent people. This is just kind of like blanket stereotyping kind of a thing. But they become collateral damage to toxic positivity because a lot of neurodivergent people just have a hard time agreeing and just going along with the flow with something that they experience as false. And they're able to see it because they have a broader view than a lot of people because of how their brains work. And so that toxic positivity, a lot of the collateral damage is people who are neurodivergent. And then they're like, oh, I must not belong in the church. I must not belong to the faith because they believe this and I experience that as false. And it's not. And so they feel like they're on the outside. So there's one that I thought of. Again, this is not like supposed to be an exhaustive list of everything and everybody, but these are just folks I thought of. All right, number two, collateral damage for toxic positivity in church frameworks. Folks who have walked through severe tragedy, they become outsiders to the faith that they can't experience anymore. They can't cling to the cliches because they just don't work for them. They can't cling to the God is good all the time. They're like, well, maybe you experience that, but not me. The people who walk through severe tragedy come out traumatized, and they can't really cling to toxic positivity. They need positive things, they need comforting things, but they've seen more, they've experienced more. Like they went through that spiral that I was talking about earlier. They went through the spiral a lot faster. We're pleading with the universe, and then they're trying to figure out, God in the midst of it, and then it didn't happen. They're retelling the story, and then they end up with a little bit of cynicism. People who go through severe tragedy, they just don't. They don't like circle, circle, circle. They just like plunge off the edge and get to the place of cynicism very fast. And so toxic positivity is impossible for those people because they're like, no, it's all BS. No, it doesn't work that way. I've experienced something very different. Um, and those people don't blend well with church going people who haven't had similar experiences because they're upholding that illusion that says that everything is fine and God has got this and he never gives you more than you can handle. And a lot of people who go through severe tragedy but still stick with like church world stuff, um, they they almost become like they're put on a pedestal, like, oh wow, you've been through so much, you must be so strong, you must be so, and they're like thinking to themselves like, I'm not strong, this is just what I got to do. So people who've gone through severe tragedy and then stick inside the church world, they don't fit within that framework because they don't see the world the same way as a lot of other church people who are clinging to toxic positivity. And so they become outsiders, but they don't want to leave necessarily. So they stick on the edges. And then they become those people who, oh, they've gone through a lot. They got a really strong faith. And they almost become like idolized, and lifted up. And then they never get close knit friendships in those communities because you can't be human with another person when you're up on a pedestal somewhere. So a lot of people who've gone through those severe tragedies end up in those places. Sometimes they stick around, sometimes they don't, but they have a hard time fitting in. Another collateral damage to toxic positivity. Folks who are part of the disabled community. Folks who are part of the disabled community, they're never going to see healing from their issues. Like you're not going to take them to Benny Hinn, and then all of a sudden their Lyme disease disappears, or their chronic health issue goes back, or they're no longer needed a wheelchair, or they're no longer epileptic, or people who are a part of the disabled community, and that's a big broad spectrum there, who need to live with that disability and be human. They have a hard time having those toxic positivity outlooks in life because they're just like, my life isn't that. Like, I remember laying in bed next to our son Isaac, where we're caretakers for him. He's disabled. He's 20, he'll be 22 next month. But I was still in the church world really deep in a pastoral system that kind of demanded the toxic positivity. And I bought a hook, line, and sinker at the time. And we were talking, and I told him that, God made him perfect. And this was one of those phrases, the cliches, wanted him to feel better about himself. And he just looked at me like I grew a second head. He's like, no, he didn't. He's like a little kid. And I was like, what do you mean, no, he didn't? God made you perfect. You're perfect. And he's like, nope, I got lots of stuff wrong with me. And I was like, I couldn't deny it at the time. So I was just like, I don't know what to say to that. But he's one that helped open my eyes to that thing. He's never going to see, the quote unquote healing from his disability issues. He's always going to be disabled, will always be his caretaker. We love him, and he's a wonderful person. But he's had to endure a lot of things that other people haven't. And then we as his caretakers have had to endure a lot of things by watching him endure a lot of things other people haven't. And for him to walk into a church space, most people treat him as a prayer request, like, oh, we're going to pray for you. We're going to pray that you get better, that you get healed, that you get whatever. He's never like a human to other people. And I'm not like whining and crying. This is a lot of people in the disabled community feel the same way, that they're reduced to a prayer request when they walk in because their very existence is a threat to the toxic positivity theology that's there. And so people who are in the disabled community, they have a hard time finding affinity and connection inside of church spaces because of that toxic positivity mindset. So there's another one there. I lost count of which one we're on, but how about folks who have walked through a dark night of the soul experience? I've got a dear friend in Alabama who walked through a dark night of the soul, left the pastorate, and he's like, God just left. He just up and left, stopped talking to me. Everything just upended in my whole life. And, I walked with him for many a years while he was trying to rebuild his life, his career, his faith, his understanding of God and everything. And I've learned a lot from him, and he's learned some stuff from me. But that dark night of the soul is real, y'all. Like, and it is a thing that's a solid theology in the Christian tradition, that sometimes the presence of God dries up and leaves, and you're just left wondering, like, what did I do wrong? And so folks who go through that dark night of the soul, I talked about dark night of the soul a little bit with Chuck DeGroot a little bit ago, so you can go look that one up if you don't know what that experience is. But folks who go through that experience with God end up in a place on the other side that is just impossible to embrace toxic positivity. You can't do it anymore. And so they have a different theological framework altogether, and they don't really fit inside of churches. They're like, wow, this is so shallow. The songs are so shallow. The teaching is so shallow. And they end up, and all these people, the disabled community, the dark night of the soul community, the neurodivergent community, those who have gone through severe tragedy. There's others too, just people who are just more empathic than other people. They just see and feel things more. They might not be in the neurodivergent area, but there's more people, and you're probably feeling some of that yourself. Like, oh yeah, you're talking about me. But those who reject this form of the faith are not rejecting the faith. And they're rejecting a pop psychology disguised as theology. It's a framework that's too small to contain their experience. Those are the people there. And in all honesty, like, if toxic positivity is as big as hope gets, then our faith is just a mocking dream of their experience that they cannot participate in. And that's why a lot of people who go through these experiences, I think it's like 95% of the disabled community does not attend church. Like, they have a hard time engaging in it. For more than reasons than just it's a hard time to, get into toxic positivity clubs, but sometimes it's just a hard thing to get out the door, and churches are not always like disabled friendly, for like they're wheelchair friendly and all that kind of stuff. But really, if that's as big as hope gets, is those cliche sayings, then our faith is a mocking dream of those people who cannot participate in that. And so I don't think that is hope. I don't think so. Hope is different from toxic positivity. Now, as I said, we started Advent this last Sunday, and Advent starts in a weird way. I say it every year. Like, what does that have to do with Advent and Christmas? But it starts usually with an apocalyptic saying of Jesus. Matthew 24, 36 through 44 was this past week. And that's the passage, probably, if you grow up in church spaces, you know it, like, nobody knows the hour and the day which the Son of Man will come back. No, the angels in heaven don't know, and neither does the Son, but only the Father. And then he says, stuff like, "For as the days of Noah were, so will they be when the coming of the Son of Man. Um, for as in the days of the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day of Noah, until the day Noah entered the ark, and they knew nothing of the flood until it came and swept them away. So too will be the coming of the Son of Man. There will be two in a field, and one will be taken. There'll be one left behind." Ooh. "So therefore keep awake, and you don't know the day and the hour which your Lord is coming. But understand this, if the owner of the house knew what time the thief was coming, then he would have prepared and would not have been robbed." Merry Christmas. Like, what the heck is going on here? Like, every year I say it, like, this is a strange way to begin the Christmas season. We're decorating Christmas trees and putting up ornaments, and everything looks green and fresh and pretty. And then it's like, and apocalyptic sayings are the way we start Advent every year, every single year. And we're used to like angels and shepherds and nativity nostalgia, and the lectionary just drops us right into this Jesus talking about the end of the world stuff. And I don't, that's hope. Somewhere in that scripture passage has got to be a picture of hope, because we're lighting the candle of hope after reading an apocalyptic saying about the end of the world. And so here's how I read the Bible. I read it a little bit differently than I used to. I try to dive into the context of the passage and hear it as they are hearing it, understanding it as they would have understood it, and then try to build a bridge between that original context and now the world that we inhabit. That's called hermeneutics, that bridge building between the two. Um, a lot of people do the shortcut hermeneutic, and they just rely on the evangelical interpretations and the frameworks that have been handed to them. And it's like, well, he's obviously talking about this, 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 and this. But if you dive into the original context, you look into historians and you look into the culture and all the things that were happening, then you try to ask the question, like, what did it mean to them to hear these words? They were just like, well, it doesn't make sense to us, but sometime, maybe 2,000 years from now, then that'll make sense to somebody. It's like, no, that was for them. Someone wrote that down for them, so it meant something to them. And so my hermeneutic has always been to dive into the original context and figure out, what did it mean to them? And then how can we build a bridge to pull out some kind of truth and some kind of wisdom for our world today? So here's some things. Like in this passage, Matthew 24, the triumphal entry has already happened. That's when Jesus rides into town on a donkey, a politically charged conversation, by the way, because he's declaring himself king through that act. The whole Palm Sunday thing was them declaring himself as king. And they believe the Messiah, according to N.T. Wright, would do three things: that he would claim the throne and get that false King Herod out of there. He would cleanse the temple and get all of the corrupt religious systems out of there. And then he would rally the people in a military rebellion against Rome so that they can become a sovereign nation again. That was the three things that everyone believed the Messiah was going to do. And they all had their specific takes on it. So when Jesus rides into town on the donkey, he's starting that conversation like, oh, the Messiah is here. He's claiming the throne. Next thing he should do is cleanse the temple. What does he do next? He walks right into the temple. He throws over the money changers' tables. He clears out the temple. There's a whole sermon in there. If you want to go down that road, you can. But he claimed the second thing, and everyone is shouting, Hosanna, Hosanna. And Hosanna was the battle cry of the Maccabees that drove the Greeks out of their land. They had this whole guerrilla warfare thing. And so them shouting Hosanna and the Pharisees freaking out, and he's saying, would you quiet your followers down? They're going to kill us all. The Romans are going to come kill us all. During the Passover, when all the people, like the town of Jerusalem, grew from like 30,000 people to maybe up to 750,000 people. And so everyone is this politically charged. There's lots of people there. Everyone's ready to take up arms against Rome. And Jesus does the first two things, fails to do the third thing. Everyone gets mad at him and they shout, crucify. Now, this end of the world passage comes after he claims the throne and cleanses the temple. And then he's walking around Jerusalem, and his disciples are like, wow, look at these buildings. They're beautiful. And look at that temple. It's glorious. And Jesus looks at it and he's like, Actually, that's going to be destroyed. Rome's going to come in here, and not one stone will be left on another. They're going to just level the ground of this place. And then they're like, when's that going to happen? That's the question they ask. When's that going to happen? And Jesus responds with a whole bunch of apocalyptic sayings that is kind of part of this passage here that we read, is part of the apocalyptic response to when is that going to happen. So our mind that's been like seeded with left behind theologies and all that kind of stuff says Jesus is talking about the end of the world when he's coming back, and then the rapture happens and we're all in heaven. And then see how we didn't build that's the quick hermeneutic. That's the cheater hermeneutic. You just believe that Jesus is talking about the theological framework that you're already holding. And most of the time it doesn't, because there's a whole culture, there's a whole political conversation, there's an economic conversation, there's a religious conversation that's happening in the world at the time. And so Jesus saying those things, he's not talking about the end of the world, he's talking about the end of their world. He's like, when you see these signs, head for the mountains. Why do you tell them to head for the mountains? Because there's cities in the mountains that they could go to, and then they're going to have to rebuild something because the temple will be destroyed. And the temple was the center of their religion, of their governance, of their economy, of their history, of their identity. It was everything. It was everything to these people. And to say that that was going to be destroyed was pretty much declaring the end of their world. Like, it'll be an entirely different age. And in 70 AD, it did happen. Jesus weeps over Jerusalem because they will not give up their violent desire to militarily uh, um, go against Rome and the armies against Rome, rebel against them. And he weeps and says, man, that mindset's going to kill them all. And so he says, yeah, this temple will be destroyed because of that mindset that they have. So this is not predicting the end of the world, but the end of their world. And so he's saying that you're going to have to rebuild something around tables. You're going to have to rebuild something around inclusiveness. So you can notice here that this passage is kind of apocalyptic. It's a kind of like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? This is not a like, hey, he didn't say, but God got this. Don't worry about it. It's going to be good. Because hope is not a denial. Hope is not some fear-based end-time speculation. Let's try and predict when this is going to happen kind of a thing. No, hope is not a denial of the reality that we inhabit, but a full showing up in whatever is happening right now. And hope is awareness both of reality and potential. So it sees the reality of the moment you're in. It sees the things that are very difficult. Hope like sees how life has treated you, whether that's been good or bad. Hope shows up in reality. It doesn't create an illusion around reality and try to insulate you from reality. Hope shows up in reality. In this passage, Jesus is like, yep, it's all going to be destroyed. It's like, oh, okay. How is that hope? Because the end of their world is going to be the beginning of a different one. Their temple system was very oppressive economically and class-wise. It was very oppressive. And so it has to acknowledge the reality of the moment, but it also has to acknowledge the potential in each moment. Hope is not like, N.T. Wright said this, hope is not a matter of blind optimism, but of a faith that refuses to be cowed by the present world. And so hope shows up in the reality that you're in. It doesn't try to blind you or illusion you or become toxically positive. Hope shows up and looks around and says, wow, that's going to be destroyed in a couple of years. But it doesn't stop there. Hope has to start with telling the truth, because that's the only way you're going to get to a place of rebuilding something that has potential. And so reality, right? Their reality was their political dreams are all going to collapse and Rome's going to come in and blow everything up. Their reality was their religious center, the temple, it's going to fall. And their reality was, if you stay here in Jerusalem and think that God's going to protect you and bless your military conquest of them, you're going to die. That's what Jesus said, all in those phrases there. And that was like Noah's flood. Like everyone was just doing their thing and going about what they normally do with the theological framework that they held. And then all of a sudden, Rome's going to sweep in and take them away. Maybe you remember the housing collapse of 2008, right? How many of us saw that coming? Maybe some of us were paying attention. I wasn't, right? We were just eating and drinking and doing normal life until this flood of economic collapse swept in and people were left without jobs and bankrupt and homeless and all that kind of stuff, right? Maybe you received a medical diagnosis. Maybe you lost a job. Maybe you have an unexpected ending to something of your life that you just weren't seeing. Like hope doesn't pretend or spin something. It's like, oh, but it'll be okay. It'll all be better. No, like Jesus doesn't promise you protection from all that stuff that life's going to throw at you, but he does promise a presence that accompanies you through the things that life throws at you. Like hope discerns the times. Hope remains aware and awake to what's happening. Toxic positivity is like this false hope that says, no, everything's fine and God is in control. That then turns into powerless pessimism. Everything's like, oh, it's going to hell in a handbasket. Nothing we can do, but God's going to come in and save the day, right? Like a lot of people don't believe that climate change is a thing. They're like, why would God allow? Why would God let the world be destroyed from climate change? No, it can't be true. It can't be true. And this toxic positivity leads us to this powerless pessimism that we don't do anything. But true hope leads to attentiveness, which gives you agency, which then says there's something for you to do in this world. Because as Ilia Delio said, which I want to get her on the show, she's amazing. She said, we're not spectators of reality, we are participants in God's unfolding future. Like hope is how we co-author a different story. Hope is how we um, grab onto the potential of something that's better. It's not passively waiting for God to rescue you from stuff. It's not pleading with the universe and hoping that something changes. Hope is partnering with whatever God is doing in the world to build a new world right in the ruins of the old one. And that's what the book of Acts is. The book of Acts is like, I want you to build small communities around tables instead of the temple because the temple will be destroyed. And the book of Acts is that expansion of the church into different areas that were centered around tables and like that whole Eucharist communion thing instead of the big temple system. It was focused around community instead of like a caste system. Like slaves were allowed to come in and hang out with like Epicureans, and they were on the same level playing ground, and that was totally radical. Like it was based on inclusion and not hierarchies. It was based on love and not legalism. And the early Christians did that. They built those communities in around tables in small towns all over the place and in big cities too. And then the temple did collapse in 70 AD. Rome came in and flattened the whole thing, just blew the whole place up, burned it to the ground. And the people who stayed, a lot of them died. A lot of them were, it was just bad. But that was not the end of the story of God, because there was a new thing happening all over the place, all over the world, in small locales, in small communities. And so hope wasn't this is all going to be destroyed, the end. It was, this is all going to fall apart. So we got to get to work on building something new. And so we, like them, are co-authoring the unfolding of the world. Like that's how God actually works. It's not that we just kind of passively sit back and then God comes in and swoops and does the healings and the whatevers. No, I don't think that's how it works. God is the potential in every situation for something better. And then we partner with that potential to make the world better. That's co-authoring our own life and unfolding with God. So sometimes hope is going to look like not just pulling yourself up by your bootstraps and getting it done, nor is it going to be passivity and like, I got to wait for God to rescue me. Sometimes hope is just going to be a day of rest, going to therapy, saying no to a lot of things, be like, no, can't do that today because today is not that day. Sometimes hope looks like, well, today is the day. I got to go fill out job applications, or I got to have these honest conversations, or I got to go get this new training and go to school, or right. Like hope Hope knows the potential of each moment and what is being asked of you, whether it is rest or action. And either of those things are co-authoring what is about to unfold. And wisdom is knowing what moment you're in and then doing something about it. So you don't need divine protection from the things that life is going to throw at you. Like there's just no guarantee that tragedy will or will not hit you. It seems totally random. I do lots of funerals and it just seems random. Like there's no overarching plan that's happening here. But hope is not divine protection. I have a friend who's going through cancer treatments and had a family member say, but with God, his chances are better. And I'm like, well, statistically, no. Like Christians die from cancer at the same rate as non-Christians. Like you look at that and it's just like, no, that's not a true statement. His chances are not better. His chances are his chances. God is going to be with him through it all, but his chances are those chances, right? You don't need divine protection. You need the divine presence that occupies your space with you and then helps you unfold whatever is coming. You don't need rescue. You need resources. Like maybe you need more schooling, education, training, different job, whatever. Hope gives you groundedness in the now to face the reality of what is, but also the imagination to see the potential and the possibility of every moment, what could be. And so those two things partnering together is more of what hope is all about. I like what Thomas Merton said. He said that hope is a lot like despair. And that's a really weird saying. But despair, you're looking at a situation and saying, I don't have what I need to get through this, right? Hope acknowledges that. And so hope is a lot like despair, more than it is like toxic positivity. But hope actually has to travel through despair to get to the hope on the other side. You can't bypass your way around despair. You have to travel through it, and hope travels through despair. I like what Howard Thurman says, hope is born when the human spirit confronts despair and refuses to be defeated. That's what it's all about there, like a refusal to give up. And so we all have this imagination, like, I just wish the world was this way. Like that's our imagination at work with hope. And if that picture in our mind is grounded in reality, but also the divine presence that occupies the space with us and the potential that exists, we have a more healthy imagination and picture of what the world could be. And then we can actually work with God in the unfolding of the universe. So that is my thoughts on hope. I hope they were helpful. I just said hope. I hope my thoughts on hope were helpful for you. I hope it finds you in a place that is I don't know what I hope. I guess I can't. My imagination is not working for somebody I can't see. This is the hard part about just being a talking head on a video for 40 minutes. But I hope this finds you well, and I hope that the divine presence guides you into new possibilities, and that you can co-author something great and wonderful this Christmas season. So that is everything I got for you. So peace out. I'll see you next week. I think we're talking about joy. And how joy is not just happiness, but something else. So, yeah, I'll see you then, and thanks for listening to me rant for a while. Peace out.